Good morning and congratulations to those of you who've made it to Thursday morning at Davos and are here with us in the room and online. My name is Hiba Ali. I'm the CEO of a news organization that reports about conflicts and disasters around the world called The New Humanitarian. And as you might imagine, refugee flows is a big part of our reporting. And today we're going to talk about integrating refugees into labor markets. Of course, this is a moment of rethink on so many things, and asylum policy and integration of refugees is one of them, particularly in Europe, but also beyond, as we'll hear about today. Having a job is key to not only economic, but also social integration for refugees. And in this moment in which we're seeing so many millions of people in Ukraine, but of course beyond as well, moving, we're also seeing that in many cases that integration is halted because of a lack of access to the labor market. The hypothesis is that Ukraine is beginning to change that and has opened up a conversation around how better to support refugees, including in how they access employment. And so today we're going to try to showcase some examples of the private sector in succeeding in doing that, but also some of the barriers in being able to scale that kind of agenda up, and then explore some opportunities for multi-stakeholder action on this and hear a few announcements. So we've got with us today to my left, Nicholas Schmidt, Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights at the European Commission. Next to him, Valérie Beaulieu, who is the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at the HR solutions company Adecco. And then Jesper Brodin, the CEO of the Inca Group, popularly known as IKEA. And finally, Ebru Özdemir, who is the chairperson of the board of Limak Holding, a Turkish conglomerate with companies across a range of industries from construction to tourism to food. So actually, Ebru, I'd like to start with you, because you have tried to really raise awareness about how refugees can be a benefit to both business and society, and have supported many projects to upskill refugees, to work with refugee-led companies. How did you get to that place, and what's your persuasion, I suppose, to your peers in the private sector around the business case for integrating refugees into the labor market?
Thank you. It's very nice to be here and discussing about this here today. You know, we see this as if the refugees are not a burden but an opportunity. And in all my talks, I say that refugees have the untapped human capital. It's very important. So seeing in Turkey above 4 million refugees right now, and probably around 1 million babies born since the conflict, we thought that we have to integrate it in a way. And currently, they have access, the refugees in Turkey have access to schools, to the health systems without paying. But at the end of the day, we have to integrate them into the work as well for this to be sustainable. So in the areas that we work, we do a lot of technical stuff like building bridges, highways, and so forth, or the dams. So it's very hard for us to integrate them in these technical fields because of the technical skills and the languages. However, what we try to do is we brought them on board by using them as subcontractors in many, like food supplies or some other services that they can give us through Turkey. And we also would like to create some role models. With Atlantic Council, a couple of years ago, we provided a report on showing what the refugee situation and what's current situation in Turkey. And afterwards, we realized that there are very courageous women in Turkey who came with their luggages to Turkey and then started business from scratch. So we decided to make a documentary, Do Seagulls Migrate? And these 4 women are enormous. I mean, one of them became a journalist. The other one is like a cook. The third one is she established a language school, because language in many sectors is a big barrier, I mean, so they have to speak Turkish. And then the fourth one is become like a wedding planner and an organizer of weddings and ceremonies. So showing this around Turkey, we wanted to create role models. And we also run another program called Turkish Women Engineers. We had 3 Syrian engineers in that, and they all become very good engineers now, going to the masters, working at the same time. And one of them already migrated to Germany, so we lost her. So basically, we tried to create role models, because from the women's perspective, people can, and from the refugee perspective as well, they can be what they can see. So this is a lot of work that we do on that side.
Ebru just mentioned that even for someone who's such an advocate of integrating refugees into the labor market, it's been difficult for Lumac to do so because of the technical skills. That's one of several barriers. And Valérie, I want to turn to you. In 2017, Adecco published a white paper that tried to really understand and then communicate those barriers to integrating refugees into the labor market. Walk us through more broadly in the sector what you're seeing as blockages.
Yeah, and we have a long tradition in the Adecco group of being committed to help refugees. That is core to our values and who we are. And what we've realized and observed is that it's always the same barriers. The first, I would say, is the administrative burden and the regulatory to make sure that people can work in a legally fashion. And I want to salute the work that the European community has done in the Ukrainian crisis to make it super easy and extremely fast. So thank you very much for that. The other barrier, as you've just mentioned, is language. We have seen situation very recently with Ukrainian refugees where they were hosted in families and they could not even communicate with the families because they don't even have English together. 85% of the refugees we've observed, especially in Poland and in the other countries from Ukraine, are women, and many haven't traveled before. So language definitely is a big barrier. The third barrier that we've seen is the fact that their qualification, when they have, are not recognized in the home countries. So you have a number of areas where, especially when you have technical qualification, you don't have equivalent. And so that's another barrier. And then last but not least, housing. You think about if you want to have a livelihood and to have a job, you need to have an address and you need to have housing. So I would say, if I summarize what we've observed in all the efforts that we've put forward to include refugees in the labor force, that would be the four. I would add just another one that I think we discussed while we were preparing, which is when comes the time for the enterprise to integrate refugees, is to make sure that you are particularly listening to their story and inclusive in their specific situation. They come with a very specific background. They're not any kind of employees. And I think having that proactive and deliberate inclusion towards refugees is also a condition to make it successful to integrate them.
So that's one tip. Your white paper also talked about other tips or recommendations for employers. What would you advise them to overcome some of these barriers?
Well, I think this listening that I was talking about is absolutely critical. And also, do not try to do that by yourself. That's also a big learning that we've had. Obviously, our core business being in the HR solution, for example, in the Ukrainian crisis, we were able in a matter of days to set up a platform that we call Jobs for Ukraine, where we invited companies. We have over 1,500 companies from the private sectors offering job to refugees. And we also closely work with NGO to make sure they would be the go-between to the refugees so that they can participate into that platform. So I think the other thing is go to your core business. Don't try to do something that you don't know how to do. And we had one of our clients. I was doing call downs to just get people to participate to the platform. And some of the clients, a big FMCG customer and the consumer good customer, was like, "I want to help more. What can I do?" And I said, "Well, do you have a warehouse in Poland, close to the border?" They said, "Yes." "Okay, so can you give us some space so that we can store some of the donation?" And there's absolutely. And this is how you can participate. Don't try to invent yourself what you are not. It will be more authentic and you will have more impact.
Jesper, I want to come to you. Inca is one of the most engaged companies when it comes to refugee action. And in 2019, you committed to supporting 2,500 refugees by the end of 2023. In all Inca markets. So tell us what you've been able to do so far on that commitment and how you've overcome some of the barriers that Valérie has just mentioned.
I think, first of all, I think you nailed the barriers, and it's a very concrete topic in many ways when you get into it. So the background for me and for us is that we are a foundation-based organization. And together with the business and the foundation share the vision to create better life for people. And in that, our foundation has been active since many, many years in supporting the first stage of refugee crisis in many places in the world. The starting point for where we are today was actually in the war in Syria a few years ago, where after the first stage, we were invited by the foundation and the Hashemites in Jordan to look into how can we actually provide people with dignity, income, purpose in the next stage of life by providing jobs. So I was personally engaged in that, and we managed to set up a social entrepreneurship with textile design and production for 400 women. And it was difficult. We learned everything about the challenges, but we overcome them. And we decided at that time to actually bring what we call today skills for employments as a program to all our markets in IKEA. And the point for us is the big why. It sits quite deep with us. It's two things that are incredibly important. Maybe the second one is what I will try to drum loud on the coming weeks and months. First of all, maybe not everybody agrees, but we think we need to represent society as it is. However the situation, we need to be part of it and be relevant for people. Secondly, this is exactly what Valerie is talking about, and you, Gabriel. This is a great opportunity. We talk about talent being one of the greatest shortages and issues right now. So why wouldn't you see this as a great opportunity? We see great progress with the employment schemes that we have. We actually also see, we have statistics on how actually the retention rates are much better even. And the barriers are about language. It's a couple of things you need to address in a systematic approach. But it's definitely something that is possible, and we show that with our numbers.
Commissioner, Valérie mentioned that you need other stakeholders involved to do this work, civil society to connect to the refugees, but also the regulatory environment. And the EU is a very special case study of that. You've responded very swiftly to Ukrainian refugees by, well, actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've put in place, in this case in particular, to make it easier for them to access the labor market?
Well, first, thank you very much for organizing this very important discussion. And I must say I like very much the comments which have been made, which reflects, by the way, the general attitude of Europeans and also our neighbors towards refugees now during this crisis. I have to admit this was not the case during the previous crisis, except Turkey, I must say, where things, because you referred to this crisis more than to the former crisis more than
exactly.
So I think this is, I do not know, is it lessons learned or is it just because first things happened extremely rapidly. In 3 weeks, more than 5 million people came into the EU. This is much more than the refugees from Syria, because it took nearly 2 years for 3 million. So there was really a very abrupt situation in that context. And the reaction was, in that way, also quite different, because we managed to activate this temporary protection directive, which had been adopted during the wars on the Balkans, but never been activated. Even then, it was not activated. And so the Commission proposed to activate it, and there was an agreement, there was a consensus to do so. And this directive is a very, I would say, progressive one in that sense, and reflects exactly what has been said here. It gives first an immediate status to people, not long demands, not bureaucratic, because very often for refugees, this kind of bureaucratic barriers are extremely difficult and also in some way discouraging, at least. That's a very moderate expression. So this is, makes things much easier. It was also the right way, because especially those countries on the borders, Poland, Romania, had to receive each day thousands and thousands of people crossing the border. So this was managed quite well, I must say. I was on the border. I was in Poland. I saw how the Poles managed this also in terms of protecting people, because, as you said, those who are coming or who have come are mainly women and children. So they have special needs also for personal protection because we know that, well, there are always also some threats or abuses around such a situation. And the second thing is people should get immediate access to labor market, and this was granted by nearly all the member states who make efforts to integrate them into the labor market. And also there's a strong will of these refugees to be integrated in the labor market, and thousands have already managed to be in the labor market, which is remarkable also. And especially also access to social services, and I fully agree there is one big issue, that's housing. That's a real big issue. Now, in the first stage, I must say that, especially in Poland, but also in Romania, where the bulk of people have arrived, civil society or just citizens have done a fantastic work. Because not only there, but in Germany, in Sweden also, but where really the millions of people have arrived, they have just received people at home. And this is also something quite exceptional. So there is a movement of solidarity in that context. But I think it is supported also by this very open approach, thanks to this frame, the Protection Directive. And now certainly we have to work on how we really give people, because many of these refugees thought they could come for some weeks or perhaps 2 or 3 months and then return back. Some have already returned back because of the situation in Kiev, which has improved, but the situation, as we all know, in Ukraine remains extremely dangerous and complicated. So I think now we have to provide these people with also the essential social services. I must say, last point is education for kids. We have more than 1 million, I think, largely more than 1 million kids arriving, many small children. And they have interrupted their schooling, everything. So I saw in Poland, I saw also in Romania how schooling for these kids was in a very rapid way put up, where kids get now continue their schooling partially through online schooling, partially with teachers who have arrived also, especially women teachers. And I think this is important, first, not to allow these kids to continue their normal life, if one can say so, but also to overcome this kind of trauma these kids have gone through. And I think in that sense, this is an essential element which you mentioned, also to help people to overcome the trauma they have been affected by.
But it also speaks to what Valerie mentioned, that kind of whole of society approach that's needed, because the parents can't access the labor market if they don't have their kids in school.
Childcare is an issue. When suddenly the Poles have got a second generation of young kids. So you have to build, you have to set up schools for these kids, because nearly as many kids as there were there have arrived from one moment to another. And then childcare, which is another challenge to give. In order to allow mothers to work, well, you have to provide the childcare, and this is a real challenge. But I noticed that a lot has been at least initiated to do so. Well, with the support of the European Union, because we all know this is also a financial challenge for the countries who have been who are facing this situation.
Yes, Per, yes.
I just wanted to build on and take the opportunity to thank the Commissioner, because the speed of policy shifts and enablement was incredible. I was, like yourself, in the border in Poland to Ukraine among the first weeks. And what I found remarkable was how the whole society, as you said, was basically kids, youngsters stopped school to become volunteers. I think majority of IKEA co-workers had people in their homes. The centers that I visited had flowers. And I was walking with a gentleman from the city of Lublin, and he told me the story that in the past, to become a hero in Lublin, in the past history, you either killed your neighbors or you got killed by your neighbors. And now he said, now we're going to try to love our neighbors. And I must say, having been in these places, you can see that the devastation and tragedy we read about in newspaper, I would like just to add the goodness of people mobilizing is just amazing to see and to be part of.
Now, we've seen that kind of solidarity in the case of Ukraine, and we've seen uncharacteristically fast action by the EU in the case of Ukraine. But more broadly, that hasn't been the case. And I heard your fellow commissioner, Margarita Skinas, who is focused on promoting the European way of life, of course. And he earlier this week said how frustrated he was at how slow the EU has been to agree a broader migration policy. I think his exact words were, it's too much talk, I'm losing patience. So that's, I think, a question. And if you see more broadly some of the frameworks that the EU had tried to put in place before Ukraine, and I'm thinking here of the Reception Conditions Directive, which required signatory member states to allow asylum seekers to access the labor market within 9 months. We saw that the UK, when it was a member, wasn't following that Hungary and others weren't really coming along. So to what extent is Ukraine likely to lead to the same kind of treatment for other refugees moving forward? Is it a turning point in the way the EU might then facilitate what it did for Ukrainians for others? That's for you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I think there are a certain number of lessons which we should draw from this case, and member states should draw. First, access to labor market. I think some countries, by the way, Sweden is one example, access to labor market is quite easy and quite immediate. So you do not need, you need not wait 9 months, 6 months until you can be integrated in the labor market. And I think this is something, I was migration minister some years ago, and I always pleaded for integrating people immediately into the labor market. And I heard always this theory, no, that's a pull factor, you should not do that, because this is, if people have to return back and they are in the labor market, that will create even worse problems and so on. But I think this is a real lesson that the sooner and the more rapidly you integrate people in the labor market, you give them the chance to work. This is a factor of integration, this is a factor of participation, this by the way, is a good opportunity, as you said. And I heard, by the way, also recently I was with a Jordan labor minister, and he said, well, the Syrian refugees to Jordan, they are all businessmen or businesswomen. They are extremely, and you mentioned Syria, Jordan, they have created a lot of jobs and opportunities. So I think this is something we should now really, a lesson we should have learned. Now, will this prevail if we are facing, hopefully not, but you cannot exclude it, other migration crises? Very difficult to say. I'm honest, I cannot say yes, this will change, because we have seen, by the way, that countries who very much opposed to migration during the migration crisis in 2015 are now on the forefront, and they have been very active. Poland is one example, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, they are very active and doing a tremendous good job.
But we've also
That's
seen,
a good point.
We've also seen double standards where certain refugees are treated one way by Poland and others are treated another way.
This is a sad issue, something which one cannot agree with, because we have seen the first day when people crossed or wanted to cross the borders that discrimination were applied. I hope that we immediately reacted against that and that things had changed, but this is an issue and shows that, well, this conflict is a very particular conflict. It's a European conflict. Let's say the truth. Let's say the truth. It's a European conflict at our borders, and especially at the borders of those countries who were the most reluctant before. So that's why I cannot say, no, this will change now the whole migration policy in Europe. By the way, what my colleague has said, yes, we are in a process of negotiating a migration policy, more comprehensive, active, and also, in a way, harmonized migration policy. The Commission has made a whole bunch of proposals, and negotiations are really progressing very, very slowly. So hopefully we had this instrument of the Temporary Protection Directive, which helped us finally to respond in a very, very positive and very active way to this crisis.
What about on the private sector side? Have you seen a shift now because of Ukraine in terms of the appetite of companies to kind of follow your lead? Yes,
You start. You were going to say something. All right. Okay.
I will try to exercise patience.
So, I mean, I just want to say something. I'm so happy to see the awareness. I mean, Turkey has been dealing with this issue for the past decade. We provided housing, we provided jobs, health services, and they are integrated in the society now, the Syrian refugees. And some of them already recruited by European Union, but the qualified ones. So actually what's left in Turkey is mostly the unskilled ones. So this puts us in a position that we have to reskill them and we have to find jobs to them, integrate into the labor market. I mean, but after the situation in Ukraine, I think nothing will be the same. I mean, we have to, as the private sector, we have to think differently, act differently, and we have to be more community focused. I mean, for the past 2 years, we've been talking about ESG, how we can make our businesses or planet better. But now we have to, I think differently, be more community focused. We have to integrate these people in our companies because there's like 80 million displaced people in the world. I mean, it's not only Ukrainians, Syrians, but more people, maybe more people will come. So we have to be more creative and probably work on solutions from the policy level with the governments, with the academia, with the private sector, but we have to work together. I mean, we should not compete anymore. We have to work together and use this diversity to put extra talents in our companies. And the other thing is we have to communicate it very well. Right now in Turkey, of course, we have economical issues. We have 11% unemployment rate, 21% in the young unemployment, so it's not easy for us. But then we have to be probably more long-term focused. And you know, from the private sector, we have to put our hands under the stone, as Turkey is saying, and you know, take it from there.
No, I would just like to agree. I think it is probably so when you listen to experts that it's going to be forever that your level of caring will be higher when it's somebody close to you. But I think still there is an opportunity to change the narrative right now. At least it's worth giving a try. So we will ourselves engage now. We are announcing today actually that we will launch the toolkit that we have developed the last years, where we are then long before the Ukrainian war developing a methodology for how we actually overcome some of the barriers and include people that has fled their homes into our workforce. So it's called Skills for Employment. It's a 7-step model, and we're launching it today to present it in the open. But even more important, I think we're challenging and inviting 500 companies to join us, to talk about this, and to if they can learn from what we have experienced, to actually be part of how we turn this into both a humanitarian and economic success story of the future.
And you're calling them to join you on what exactly?
So we want them to join the movement, but we also want to have a race up till December 23, when there will be a big event around refugees, and so we see that as a milestone. Some of this work is not done in a day, so you need to put the program in place. But what we feel and what we experience is that it is not only the right thing to do, but it has all the economic upsides as well. So we're going to invite people. We're going to use the International Refugee Day, I think it is the 20th of June, to actually create a dialogue, but in particular invite other corporates to be part of it.
Can I build on that? Because I think we see much more interest than in the past from the private sector. And it has a lot to do with the aftermath of the pandemic. I want to be provocative here because what private sector has realized is that we need to give meaning to what we do.
Yes.
And all our stakeholders are asking us, private sector, to stand for our values and to take a stance. In the past, we were getting away with just a moment of contrition and poor guys, etc. But now if you want to retain your employees, they need to know that you're true and authentic to your values. Our motto in the ADECO group is make the future work for everyone. We can't let the refugee on the side of the road. So it's core of our mission. And when we call for our customers, and I did I did a lot of these call downs to get companies to participate on the platform Jobs for Ukraine. People were jumping in. And the other thing that was interesting is, by the way, it's not only the employees, clients are also asking you, what are you doing? Where are you on the spectrum of support? Your investors are asking you, because ESG being so big. And I think when I saw the movement towards, yes, we want to participate, the other thing that was very telling is that today you have people who are dedicated. Guess who I was calling? It was not the CEO. The CEO was saying, talk to my sustainability officer. This person is responsible to make sure that we have our social impact. So what we see, and it's not ideal, I don't want to paint a rosy picture, etc. There is still a lot of good intent and not enough action. But what I see is that the social impact is becoming more and more into the fabric of the private sector, and we have to participate. It can't be something on the side.
Which is new, because as you were telling me earlier, Jesper, you've been lonely out there doing this kind of work since 2015. You haven't seen many of your peers in this space.
Well, I would say to the commissioner's point also, that the closer you come to the war and to the conflict, it's more of a grassroots movement, and everybody, small companies, big, everybody's engaged. But I would say, as I've been traveling to the markets in IKEA surrounding or neighboring to Ukraine, I've been told by UNHCR, Red Cross, Médecins Sans Frontières, etc., that they have not met anybody in my position traveling around this topic, so to say. And so I think there is still something, what you say, that people are, in general, distancing themselves to this topic. But it's part of our reality, it's part of our society, and also so is the opportunity. So therefore, I think I'm happy to share that insight with other fellow corporate leaders.
Just a word on the previous crisis. There has been a study made in Germany because Germany received more than 1.5 million of refugees during 2015 and 16. And there has been a study on the impact, economic impact. And this study shows absolutely that the economic impact is positive. So I think we have also to work very, very strongly on the narrative of immigration. And I think we have to be prepared. Well, the demographic evolution in Europe is what it is. And so we have to work on this narrative. Now, we launched the idea of talents. Indeed, Europe now says, well, we should try to attract more talents. That's true, because other parts in the world, they attract the talents. I think here Europe has to be more attractive. And I think we have to work in our societies on these issues. But immigration is not a one-way street. It's not just the immigrant has to do everything, but also the society has to give the opportunities to integrate. It's a two-way street. And I think here efforts have to be made. Housing is important, fundamental, jobs, education, and also the possibilities really to be part of the society. And the community approach, which you mentioned, seems to me extremely important.
And I do wonder if by showing that the economic benefits, making that case, putting it into practice, that helps detoxify, as your colleague said the other day, the more kind of social or demographic piece in Europe in particular that has been such a blockage. So there may be a way in which that narrative kind of helps, what you're doing helps play into that narrative. Sure. I want to open it up to the floor if there are any questions, and if you could briefly introduce yourselves. Yes.
I'm Guido van Ham from the University of Antwerp. I'm a virologist, so I'm not related. But I also, in my spare time...
If you could just put the mic a little bit closer.
Yeah, I'm Guido van Ham from the University of Antwerp. And in my spare time, I take care of some refugee issues in Belgium. And so I'm surprised that the elephant in the room has not been talked about, which is racism and Islamophobia, which is terrible, and which is especially terrible in Eastern Europe. So how are we going to address racism and Islamophobia? Thank you.
And maybe we'll take one more and then come back to the panel.
Hi, I'm Sapta from Tata Consultancy Services. I manage European operations. My question is around, there are a lot of people coming in to Europe from Ukraine, seeking jobs. We should have a platform by which a lot of people are looking to employ them. Is there a platform that is created which is common, which the Commission can create, where you can publish those jobs and we can kind of take these people in? Otherwise, every enterprise trying to go and these people coming into various platforms like LinkedIn and others is too complicated. And that would probably speeden up this whole employment aspect. And the second one I had was on skills, because we need to develop skills at scale, and what are the solutions for that? Are there programs that are coordinated by the Commission that can help us all join together?
The good news is that you don't have to build it. Adecco already has.
So we have already a platform, it's Job for Ukraine. I can send you the details right after. This was put in place like 2 weeks after the invasion. And so we already have over 1,500 companies participating from any sectors. And it's totally free, it's totally pro bono. And so we are working with the NGO to make sure that refugees get access to the platform. We are also providing coaching for them to develop their resume, to do assessment on their skills. And we also have over 6,000 refugees who are benefiting from a wide range of programs for training. We have partnership with Berlitz on language. We have partnership with Cisco, Microsoft, etc., the big tech industry for technical skills. So we are actually calling on for partners. Come and join us. As I was saying, it's not the Adecco group doing everything by ourselves. It's the coalition of the willing. It's everyone participating to their core. And so if in your company you have curriculum that you could put on the platform, please come, because this will accelerate the access to market for all these refugees.
I'm not ignoring the Islamophobia question. I'm going to come back to it. But Ebru, do you want to speak to the skills issue? How do you address that challenge?
This is what we are doing right now, trying to put down programs together with the academia and the language schools as well, and especially the lady who's the entrepreneur who's opened the language school. Because without language, it's very hard for them to survive in Turkey. I'm talking about the Syrians. By the way, we have Ukrainians too, but they're more integrated. And with the Syrians, they are very much currently in this textile sector, but we really want them to be technically involved as well. I work with one petroleum engineer, a woman, and it was so hard for her to make her diploma valid. Yeah. It took ages for her. I experienced day by day with her to send it to Aleppo from the university. So these are the things right now we are working on the engineering level. But the skilling, thanks to digitalization with universities, language school, we are putting down the program together.
Maybe a short remark, and also I will enjoy studying how you operate, but also this is not a competition. So we're also glad to share the learnings, because as we are launching our methodology today, it's about the nitty-gritties in the how to overcome the barriers. And then I would just like to comment, even if I'm sure that the Commissioner would love to comment on the first question here.
I'm not sure he will love to comment on the first question.
But I think from our perspective, it's a very, not to allow elephants to be visible in the room. I think it's a very valid question that is not only, of course, a political ownership. We all have to take ownership for that question. It's a scary and complex question. And I would not pretend to have the answer to your question. But I believe today, and these days I've experienced in Davos, people discuss, on top of the challenges, interesting enough, I hear talent and I hear polarization. And racism is probably the ugliest part of polarization. I think by what we are discussing here, by bringing people together, to not isolating people in our societies and making sure people get to know each other, work together, at least I think that holds a small part of the puzzle in how we can avoid that. So thank you.
But practically within IKEA, did you face resistance because of some of that racism or Islamophobia when you tried to integrate refugees?
Of course we did, but I would say not. It's almost. It's not been one of the topics we had to discuss. I thought it would be. it's there in society. But since we're a company that are for many people, and that we, since ages, have been representing people and basically having an inclusive attitude to gender, where you come from, what's your sexual preference, whatever. I think people are more curious and driven by that force.
And I think it was one of the recommendations that came out of the white paper, that also setting a tone from the top becomes very important. It's such a cultural issue that can perhaps be part of the answer, that when CEOs send a certain message within their companies, that you get a bit more traction. But Commissioner, more broadly, within Europe, what can be done to overcome the Islamophobia that is at the heart of so much of the anti-refugee sentiment?
Well, first, I want to say that certainly the more Eastern European, Central European countries, the problem was, well, we do not want people of a different religion. That was very clearly the message we got. Now, I would not say racism is just in Central and Eastern Europe. Racism is everywhere, in all our societies. And we know that populism is growing with racism and Islamophobia. And when we look at the election recently in some countries, how these themes have been at the center for some parties. This is quite worrisome. So I think we have really to work on that and also work on the solutions, because we failed in many respects on really getting the right integration solutions. When you put all the people in some poor area and they have no job, and then the problems come up of racism and all kinds of difficulties in some area or suburbs in big cities, well, these are the errors we committed during the past and which have to be absolutely corrected. But certainly we cannot accept any racism or discrimination. But this is a difficult fight we have really to fight. But certainly in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, these are society. We have also to understand these societies. They were closed societies, largely closed. So this was a shock for them, and it was abused by some political leaders. We all know that, who started to rebuild fences around their country. The first country where fences were demolished was the country where a fence was again built. So this is also a policy and populist policies which we have to fight. So this on racism. This is, by the way, a major topic in the European Union. I think non-discrimination, fighting all kinds of inequalities and discriminations. This is high on our agenda.
And I can tell you that I think across many sectors beyond government and corporate, even within my world, the humanitarian sector, a lot of agencies are looking to say, how can we leverage this moment of Ukraine to kind of tap into a broader solidarity, and that there's a lot of energy going into thinking about how can you translate that into broader support for other refugees. Whether that works or not is an open question. We've got 1 minute and 45 seconds left. So maybe just to close, if I can hear from each of you, if there's one kind of practical tip for folks who are interested in moving forward in this direction, who are facing some of these barriers, who are looking for advice, what's one way forward that you can propose to them? And maybe, Jesper, since you're launching the toolkit, we can start with you.
No, but I would, two things. I wrote here, winter is coming, but I realized I was already taken.
You wrote what?
Winter is coming.
Winter
I think,
is coming.
we need to brace ourselves. There are several things going on in the world right now that are scary. We stand before a famine crisis. We stand before climate change that will put enormous pressure on this topic. And again, the war is ongoing in Ukraine, and as much as things, there are some optimism in it. We have a winter ahead of us that's going to be energy crisis and more of refugees more likely. So on one hand, I think we need to brace ourselves and make ourselves ready for the coming period. Secondly, I would just say that let's continue to do what I think the Forum does so excellently, and others. Let's bring this topic into the public. Let's talk about it. Let's have a dialogue, and let's make sure that there is a space where companies have a responsibility, a bigger responsibility to actually be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Valérie.
Well, I would say for corporate, for private sector, focus on where you're good at. Don't try to invent yourself an NGO if you are not. Work with the people who know. Don't try to think that you come to the solution by yourself. Are you sure you know what the Ukrainian people want? All these women who are refugees, so work with the people who have access so that you get their needs. And work with the public institution as well. It will take a village to make that happen. So that would be my conclusion.
Commissioner?
Well, I think we have to keep the momentum of solidarity in our societies, because there's one danger which we should not totally exclude. That's the danger of some kind of fatigue at the end. So I think we have a huge responsibility in supporting, in finding very concrete solutions, and I think what the private sector is doing is of essence. It's key. Because we have, housing is key, because, well, people are ready to receive somebody for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And then maybe they start to say, well, where's the solution? So there is, for the public sector, a big responsibility to work on, also on that side, on solutions, to finally, to take over the solidarity which has been so strong on the citizens or civil society side. So I think this is something we have to plan ahead, to see ahead, because unfortunately this war will go on, and this is terrible.
And I wonder if actually private sector engagement might push some of the more reluctant governments to also pick up their socks. Ebru, last word.
And for refugees, I mean, you're already courageous. You know, you have done a lot. So continue to be resilient. Ask for help. Asking for help is not bad, but also show us, to the private sector, to the government, show us ways to help you. Because, you know, the programs, it's like we come up with after direct communication. So it's very good to ask for help. It's nothing bad. And plus showing us ways how you can be benefit to us and be benefit to you. For private sector, nothing will be the same. I mean, you know, world has changed. We have to act differently. We have to do everything what we have done so far differently. As Valerie said, values are important. I mean, now we have 50,000 people. Our value is that we exist if we deliver, and we exist if we collaborate. And we have to collaborate maybe with you, with the others, but all of us has to join forces, not only the real sector, but with the governments. I mean, you know, with European Commission, understanding the rest of the world as well. But it's good to see that. I mean, now there's bigger solidarity, and I'm happy to see that.
So I've heard that there are a number of barriers to being able to integrate refugees, but that they are surmountable when there is an appetite, and that appetite is beginning to grow, and that we may be at a turning point now, not only because of Ukraine, but as you say, Valérie, because of the pressure that employees and others are putting on companies to be better global citizens. And I think you've also heard a number of practical tools that you can use, from Adecco's platform to IKEA's toolkit, for the EU, this directive that could perhaps be applied to other refugees. And so I hope you're walking away from this with a few tangible things that you can take forward. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.